Hello, I am Brittany Lewis, a graduate student at the University of Rhode Island. Today I will be talking about my paper, I Got My Nose Print, but it wasn't accurate, how people with upper extremity impairment authenticate on their personal computing devices. This work was done with my advisor, Krishna Venkatasubramanian. Authentication on personal computing devices often makes ability assumptions, which may make it inaccessible for people with upper extremity impairment or UEI. Someone with UEI has reduced use of their shoulders, upper arms, forearms, hands, and/or fingers. So far, work to explore device authentication for people with UEI has been limited. No work has focused on the experiences people with UEI have throughout the entire authentication process. For the purposes of this work, we defined the authentication process as being composed of three phases: setup, credential verification, and failure resolution. In the setup phase, credentials are registered and the computing device is initialized for authentication. The credential verification phase is where a fresh credential is presented and compared to the registered credential in order to verify the user's identity. Failure resolution occurs if the credential verification is unsuccessful and provides additional ways such as retries to allow a user to authenticate. To better understand the authentication processes of people with UEI, we posed two core research questions. How and why do people with UEI use or not use authentication with their personal computing devices? And where, if anywhere, in the authentication process do barriers arise? And how do people with UEI work around those barriers, if at all? In order to answer these questions, we conducted 8 semi-structured interviews with participants with UEI. Participants are identified as P1 through P8. We found that our participants commonly use PINs and passwords for authentication. Out of our 8 participants, only P2 and P7 did not use authentication. Interestingly, P7 stated that she does not use authentication because she uses augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC, on her tablet. She was concerned that authentication might impede her ability to communicate. Out of the participants who used authentication, all of them used a password or a PIN on one of their devices as a verification credential. Other credentials, such as biometrics, were far less common. Participants often did not know all of the options that were on their devices. Therefore, participants did not always have definitive reasons for choosing passwords over other credentials. They did, however, have reasons for using authentication. 5 out of 6 participants used authentication primarily for security. However, security was not the only reason for using authentication. For instance, P2 used authentication when she was younger because of social pressure. Despite our participants' desire for security, they encountered barriers throughout the entire authentication process, which caused them to prioritize usability over security. During the setup phase, barriers could sometimes discourage authentication use altogether. For instance, P4 had difficulty coming up with a memorable PIN for his iPad and therefore didn't use authentication on that device. During credential verification, complex passwords were particularly challenging for some of our participants. P6 spoke of how much she hated them because of the various requirements, which caused them to be complicated and unforgiving. When she could, P6 would work around this issue by using a fingerprint biometric instead. However, biometrics could present their own barriers. For instance, 2 of our participants, P8 and P2, had wanted to use the fingerprint sensors on their iOS devices, but neither of them typed with their fingers. Therefore, they both attempted unsuccessfully to use toe print and nose print respectively as a workaround. When credential verification fails, authentication processes have retries and backup credentials that allow a user to authenticate. Occasionally, these were not sufficient. P6 actually restarts her computer after a couple of credential verification failures to ensure she gets a sufficient number of retries. Understandably, she found this process frustrating. In the future, more research needs to be explored for improving the accessibility of device authentication so that it can be made both usable and secure for people with UEI. For example, biometrics should be designed that work with the abilities of someone with UEI, such as nose or toe print biometrics. Thank you so much for listening. I'm always happy to answer any questions about this research through my email, bslewis@uri.edu.